1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a rock into a cave and shattered our understanding of history. What he found would be called the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. But what if the real story isn't the discovery, but the suppression? For decades, we've been told a simplified tale, but the full truth is far more dangerous. This is not just about confirming the Bible. This is about a war for the soul of faith itself. These are the Dead Sea Scrolls secrets they didn't want you to read. Imagine a library hidden in a desert, sealed in clay jars, just before an invading Roman army crushed a rebellion. This wasn't just any library. This was the sacred text repository of a radical, apocalyptic Jewish sect, the Essenes of Qumran. They weren't mainstream. They were purists, separatists who believed the temple in Jerusalem was corrupt and that the end of the world was near. They didn't just preserve the Bible as we know it. They preserved their own Bible. And within their writings, we find a blueprint for a Messiah, a blueprint that doesn't quite match the one that would later emerge from Nazareth. The first secret, the scrolls reveal that the world of Jesus was not a religious vacuum. It was a cauldron of messianic expectation, and the recipe at Qumran was explosive. Mainstream history often presents a simple narrative. The Jews were waiting for a single Messiah. The scrolls shatter that illusion. The Essenes weren't waiting for one Messiah, but for three. First, the prophet like Moses, a final great teacher. Second, the priestly Messiah from the line of Aaron, who would purify worship. And third, the kingly Messiah, the prince of the congregation, from the line of David, who would wage a holy war. This is the secret they don't teach in Sunday school. The concept of a single, unified Christ figure was not the universal Jewish belief. The scrolls, like the War Scroll, describe a final, apocalyptic battle led by these figures against the sons of darkness. Now consider the figure of Jesus in the New Testament. He is portrayed as a prophet, the high priest, and the king. The theological genius of early Christianity was to combine these separate Qumranian roles into one person. But the scrolls force us to ask, was this a divine revelation or a brilliant theological synthesis? But the most direct challenge comes from a fragmented text known as 4Q246, the Aramaic Apocalypse, or more sensationally, the Son of God Scroll. Dated to decades before the birth of Jesus, it reads, "He will be called the Son of God, and they will call him the Son of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom." Let that sink in. The core titles used for Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, Son of God, Son of the Most High, are found in a pre-Christian Hebrew manuscript. The establishment's explanation, this is about a pagan king or a generic Jewish Messiah, but the language is too specific, too celestial. The uncomfortable secret the scrolls whisper is this: the foundational titles of Christianity were already in circulation within a radical Jewish context. This doesn't disprove Jesus' divinity, but it radically recontextualizes it, stripping it of its uniqueness in the eyes of scholars who wish to contain its power. The Qumran community lived by a secret rulebook. The most important was the community rule, 1QS. This was more than just monastic guidelines. It was a blueprint for an army of the elect preparing for the end of days. Initiates underwent a brutal 2-year probation. Their property was communal. They practiced ritual purity to an extreme. But the most controversial rule was this: the community was to be led by a council of 12 men and 3 priests. Sound familiar? Jesus had his 12 apostles, with 3, Peter, James, and John, forming an inner circle. The structural parallel is staggering. It suggests that the early Christian community organization was not a spontaneous invention, but may have been modeled after the most radical and disciplined Jewish sect of the time, the Essenes. Were the early Christians influenced by, or even a breakaway faction from, Qumran? It's a question the scrolls force us to confront. So, if these findings are so revolutionary, why don't more people know about them? The answer is a scandal that lasted for decades. For over 40 years, a small, exclusive clique of scholars controlled access to the majority of the scrolls. They published at a glacial pace, hoarding the fragments like dragons on a treasure hoard. It was an academic lockdown. Why? Officially, it was due to complexity and politics, but unofficially, many believe it was because the scrolls were too theologically dangerous. They challenged the simplistic origins of Christianity and revealed a messy, complex, and diverse Jewish world that didn't fit the neat narrative. The truth was held hostage until 2 scholars, Geza Vermes and Robert Eisenman, publicly decried the conspiracy. And then, in a story fit for a spy novel, a computer scientist from Louisville, using a reconstructed concordance, broke the academic embargo and forced the release of the scrolls to the world in 1991. The gatekeepers were overthrown, but by then, the official narrative was already set in stone. The ultimate secret of the Dead Sea Scrolls is not a single text or a hidden prophecy. It is this: the Bible was not a fixed, monolithic book in the 1st century. The scrolls reveal multiple versions of key books, like Jeremiah and Samuel, circulating at the same time. Some were longer, some shorter. The Word of God was still, in a sense, being edited, curated, and debated. The scrolls prove that the faith of this period was vibrant, diverse, and fiercely contested. There wasn't one Judaism, but many. And Christianity emerged from this chaotic, creative ferment. The establishment doesn't want you to know this because it gives you back your power to question. It reveals that our scriptures are the product of a long, human, and contentious journey. A journey of faith, yes, but also of politics, sects, and choices. So, what does this mean for you? The Dead Sea Scrolls are a mirror. They reflect a time when faith was a battlefield of ideas, not a museum of dogma. They remind us that what was passed down to us is what survived, not necessarily all that was. They challenge the believer to a deeper, more historically aware faith. And they challenge the skeptic to recognize the profound and complex spiritual struggle that gave birth to Western civilization. The secrets of Qumran were almost lost to the desert, and then almost lost to academic pride. But now, they are yours. The question is no longer what they are hiding from you. The question is, what will you do with the truth now that you've found it? If you are ready to uncover more hidden history, to look behind the curtain of mainstream narratives, then subscribe to this channel, because the story doesn't end here. Next week, we dive into the Gnostic Gospels and the terrifying concept of the demiurge, the false god who rules this world. Subscribe. The past is not what you think.